In this section, we're going to be learning about problem solving, or at least that's the title of the section. But what we're really going to be learning about is translating English into math. That's my best way to describe it. Okay, so we're basically going to work on translating English, so sentences, into math. In particular, we're going to be translating it into equations. Okay? So I'm going to be working through a lot of examples here. We're going to start with some more basic examples. But before I even do an example, I should probably write down some important words here. So what are some important words in English, and how do they translate into math? I'm going to make a short table here. Okay, so I can add more to this table later, but for now, the most important thing from English that you might not know how to translate into math is a number. So when someone says a number in English, that actually means the variable. And usually people represent the variable as x. I'll write variable in parentheses. X is the standard variable. You can use any letter you want, though. So whenever you hear the phrase a number, you're going to write down x in math. Another very common phrase or word would be is or was. And that actually translates as equals. Okay, it translates as the equals symbol. Okay, so for example, someone might say, a number added to 7 is 2. Well, the is actually translates as an equals. Okay? So those are a couple of the most important phrases or words, and that's how they translate. So let's go ahead and do an example. We'll start using all this information that I just talked about. Okay, so example. Write the following sentence as an equation. Write the following sentence as an equation. In other words, they're asking us to translate from English into math. Okay, and the sentence that they're giving us here is, it says, a number added to -7 is -2. Okay, so that's the English that they're giving us there. A number added to -7 is -2. And this is going to be example number 1 that I'm doing here. So that's going to be example number 1. Alright, so what you want to do here is you want to take what they gave you and actually translate it. So let's start with a number. So what does a number mean? Well, we just said a number is the same as the variable x. Okay, so that's going to be x. Okay, and then added to. What does added to sound like? Well, I think most people know when you say added, that means plus. Okay, so we're going to write plus. So added to just means plus. And then we've got -7. So I'll go ahead and put parentheses around -7. And then what about is? Well, we just said is translates as equals. Okay? So that is there actually translates as equals. Okay, so we have x plus -7 equals -2. And you might be wondering, well, why did I put parentheses around the -7? That's because we're adding -7. So we have plus -7, and you're supposed to have parentheses. That way they don't look like they mean something else. Okay, so we've translated this now. So our equation is x plus -7 equals -2. Okay, and you can simplify it a little bit, but I think this is how they would want you to leave your answer. So I'm going to go ahead and box that. And obviously you don't have to use different colors for each part of it. I'm just using that for my explanation. And on some of the later questions, they're not just going to want you to translate, they're also going to make you solve the equation. But for now, in this question, they just want you to translate. Okay. So let's see another example. Okay, so example number 2. For this example, the English that they're giving us is a number subtracted from -60 amounts to 146. A number subtracted from -60 amounts to 146. So we already know how to translate a number. How does a number translate? Well, a number is x. That's our variable. And then what do you think subtracted from means? What does subtracted from mean? Well, I think everyone knows when they say subtracted from, they mean minus. But the question is, does it mean x minus -60, or is it -60 minus x? And the answer is actually, the order is switched around. So it's actually going to be written as -60 minus x. So -60 minus x. Okay, so x is a number. Subtracted from means minus, but you switch the order. And you don't always switch the order. It's just certain English phrases like subtracted from where you switch the order. So you might think it would be x minus -60, but because it says subtracted from, it switches the order around, and it's actually -60 minus x. Okay, so that's a little bit of a tricky English thing there. Okay? And then what about amounts to? What do you think amounts to means? Well, amounts to is just like saying is, so that actually means equals. Okay, so amounts to means equals. So we have -60 minus x equals 146. And that's going to be our answer. All right, so that's kind of cool. I know it can be kind of confusing at first, particularly with questions like this where the English switches the order. But we'll see lots of examples to make sure you get all this down. Okay, so let's see a couple more to make sure you learn all the new stuff. Okay, so example number 3. Twice a number gives 102. Twice a number gives 102, 102. So the big thing here that's new is the word twice. So twice actually means you multiply times 2. That's the big new thing here. So twice means multiply by 2. Okay, and we already know that a number translates as x. Okay, so twice a number means 2 times x, or 2x. So we actually get 2x, and then the word gives. Gives is just like the word is, was, or in the previous example, amounts to. Any of those all mean equals. So what we have here is actually 2x equals 102. And by the way, on these examples, they still aren't asking us to solve it, so I'm not bothering to solve it. But you could solve these equations, and later on they will be asking you to solve some of the harder ones. All right, so before I do another example, I wanted to go back up to our table up here. Obviously, I can't write down everything in this table, but I wanted to add in a few more key words in English and how they translate in math. So, in particular, I wanted to talk about some special words in English and how they translate. So the first word I wanted to talk about was sum. Okay, so sum means add. Okay, so S-U-M in English means an addition or plus in math. And then there's 3 other words that I wanted to write down here that are important. So sum means plus. Difference, I don't know if you guys have heard difference before, but difference actually translates as minus. Okay, so sum is plus, difference is minus. And then product, the word product actually means multiply, so times. That means multiply. Okay, and then the last word that you might not know about is called quotient. Okay, and quotient means divide. So obviously there are a lot more words that I could put in this table, but these are the most important ones. So a number translates as x, is or was translates as equals, sum translates as plus, difference translates as minus, product translates as multiply, and quotient translates as divide. Okay? So that's some more of that table to fill in for us. So that should be helpful. So let's go ahead and go on to our next example. Okay, so example number 4. This one's going to be quite a bit more challenging because sometimes things in English end up being worded very awkwardly and it's hard to translate them. So this one says the product of 4 and the sum of -3, the product of 4 and the sum of -3 and a number is -40. Okay? So on this one, there's just a lot of words and a lot of stuff going on. But if you break it down into little parts, it's not too bad, but sometimes it can be hard to figure out what exactly they mean when they say such a long sentence. So let's start with the product. So the product means we're going to multiply. We just talked about that in the table above. So that means we're going to multiply. Okay? And what are we going to multiply? We're going to multiply 4 and the sum of -3 and a number. So the thing that's tricky about this is they want us to multiply 4 and something, and even though they don't tell you, there secretly has to be parentheses around the sum. Okay? So I'm going to put parentheses around this sum here. Okay, and I know that's strange, but when they say the product of 4 and all of that, there's secretly parentheses around it. That's why I put the blue parentheses. So what we have here is actually 4 times parentheses, and then we're going to go ahead and put in all this stuff in blue. So the sum, what does sum mean? Well, we said sum means add. Okay? So the sum of -3 and a number means we're going to be doing -3 plus a number. Well, how does a number translate? A number translates as the variable, so that's going to be x. So we're going to have 4 times the quantity -3 plus x. Okay, and that's the hard part. So again, you might be wondering, well, how on earth did he know to put parentheses around this? And how did he know that it started here and ended there? Well, again, it's English and it's hard to understand, but the basic idea is when they say the product or the sum of something and something else, that word "and" there means that this whole next phrase actually has to have parentheses around it. I know it's very strange, but the phrase "and" means that the next thing has to have parentheses around it. So that's how we got these parentheses here. Okay, and then to translate the rest of this, we have "is." So we know that "is" actually translates as "equals." Okay, so to finish the problem, we have this is equal to -40. So we have 4 times the quantity -3 plus x equals -40. Hi, Max. There's my kitty. Okay. All right, so we finished that. That was example number 4. And there's a couple more tricks that I should probably show you. So problem number 5, example number 5. This one actually has new instructions. So translate into an equation then solve the equation. Solve the equation. So new instructions. So now not only do they want us to translate it, but after we translated it, then they want us to solve that equation that we wrote down. And some of your later homework problems are like this. A lot of the earlier ones, though, you're just translating. But I think the last 5 problems on your homework, you're going to actually have to also solve. So that'll be an extra step. But what we're dealing with here, the sentence that they're giving us is the sum of 3, 5, and a number. All right, so the sum of 3, 5, and a number amounts to 14. Amounts to 14. And then they have an extra sentence where they say, find the number. Find the number. Okay, and it's that second sentence that's basically telling us after we've finished translating and we write down the equation, we actually have to solve that equation. Okay? So let's break this down. Let's start with the sum. What does sum mean? Well, we already said in our table up there that the sum means plus. But this is tricky. It's the sum of 3, 5, and a number. So that sum, the plus, actually refers to that entire list. So 3 things. So what's that going to look like? It's going to be 3 plus 5 plus a number. And how do we translate a number? Well, a number translates as x, right? So the tricky part here was realizing that when they write sum of, and then they start listing things, they mean you add every single item in the list. And then how does amounts to translate? Well, amounts to is just like the word is. So amounts to just means equals. Okay, so we're going to write 3 plus 5 plus x equals 14. All right, and then on the earlier questions, we would be done. But for your homework, for these later questions, first you go ahead and box this equation that you wrote down. But then after you do that, you also have to find the number. So you actually have to solve this equation. So there's going to be 2 boxes in my math lab. First one, you enter in the equation like we did here. And then the second box is going to be where you solve and you find the number. But that shouldn't be too bad here. On the left side, we can combine like terms. So we have 3 plus 5 is 8. So we have 8 plus x equals 14. Okay, and then to isolate x, we have to get rid of the positive 8. So we minus 8 from both sides. And that actually gives us x equals 14 minus 8, which is 6. So when they say find the number, they actually want us to, let me scroll down a little bit. They want us to solve the equation, and we did solve the equation. So the number they were looking for is 6. Okay, so that was example number 5. And now we're going to go ahead and go on to example number 6. Example number 6 has the same instructions as number 5. So they want you to first translate, and then they want you to solve. Okay, so translate and solve. Okay, and here our sentence is the difference. Okay, the difference of a number and 2. The difference of a number and 2 is equal to the quotient of 40 and 5. Of 40 and 5. Okay? And then they have the second sentence, which is find the number. Find the number. All right, so this one's pretty long, just all the words. But if you remember from our table, the difference actually means subtract. Okay, so the difference means we're going to be subtracting here. It means minus. Okay, and they say the difference of a number and 2. So we're going to be subtracting a number minus 2. And you don't switch the order with difference. Okay? So that's one of the weird things about English. When they say subtracted from, you switch the order. But when they say difference, you don't switch the order. And it's just a little detail about English that can be kind of annoying. But there's all these little different cases based on different phrases in English. So when you say subtracted from, you do switch the order, but when you say difference, you don't switch the order. Okay? So a number is going to translate as x, and then we have the difference of a number x and 2. So that's actually all going to translate as x minus 2. We are not switching the order because difference does not switch the order in which you say things. Or the order in which you write them, rather. Okay? But then the next part of this problem is the word is. So how do we always translate is? Well, is always translates as equals. And if you realize, there's actually more here. So this time they don't just say is, they also say is equal to. So technically I could box all of this. So here they actually say is equal to. Okay, so that's actually even easier. But normally they'll just say is. So you're going to get used to the idea of them saying is, meaning equals. Okay, so we have x minus 2 equals, and then we have the quotient. So what did we say quotient means? Well, we said the quotient means you actually divide. Okay, so we're going to be dividing here. All right, and you're going to be dividing in order. You're not going to switch the order. So they say the quotient of 40 and 5. That means in order, you're going to be doing 40 divided by 5. So 40 divided by 5. And in the book, they usually write division as a fraction. That's why I usually write it that way as well. And also, they'll be writing it that way in your homework. Okay, so our equation should be x minus 2 equals 40 divided by 5. Okay, 40 divided by 5. All right, and then notice they also asked us to find the number. So to finish the problem, we actually have to solve this equation. So how are we going to solve this equation? Well, first of all, we can simplify the right side. So what is 40 divided by 5? Well, if you remember, 8 times 5 is 40, so that means 40 divided by 5 has to be 8. So our new equation should be x minus 2 equals 8. Okay, and then how do I finish isolating x? Well, I have to get rid of the negative 2 on the left side. How do I do that? Well, the opposite of subtracting 2 is adding 2. So we're going to be adding 2 to both sides. Okay, so we get x equals 8 plus 2 is 10. Okay, so now we've isolated x, so the number they asked us to find is 10. So I'll go ahead and box that. Okay? And on your homework, they might not always write x equals 10. In fact, since it's in words, they might say, instead of x equals 10, they'll say, the number is 10. That's how you can say it. To write it as a sentence. All right, so the end of this section is challenging, so I'm going to be doing quite a few examples to hopefully get you prepared for it. So next example is example number 7. Example number 7. This one has the same instructions. They want us to translate and then solve. And this is a pretty long sentence. So this one is 35 less a number. 35 less a number is equal to the product of 2 and the sum of a number and 7. Okay, so 35 less a number is equal to the product of 2 and the sum of a number and 7. Find the number. Find the number. Okay, so this is about as hard as your homework gets. And it takes a while to do these problems because you have to break it down into parts. I think we all know that 35 means 35, but the new thing here is the word less. So less actually means you subtract and you don't switch the order. Okay? It's only with the subtracted from. With subtracted from, you actually do switch the order, but with difference or less, you subtract in order. Okay, so this is going to be 35 minus x. Okay, because the number is x. All right, so far we have 35 minus x. And then they say is equal to. Well, remember, is equal to means we write the equals symbol. Okay, so far we have 35 minus x equals, and then we have the product of 2 and the sum of a number and 7. Uh-oh. So that's pretty complicated, but let's start with the product. So we know that product means times. That means times. And we're doing the product of 2 and the sum of a number and 7. And just like last time, when it says the product or the difference or the quotient of something and something else, there's automatically parentheses around this part. Okay, so it's actually the product of 2 and parentheses the sum of a number and 7. It's very strange, I know, but if you find this overwhelming, you can kind of just go through these videos, and the homework questions are pretty similar, so hopefully you can kind of just figure it out, because they'll be like these questions but with different numbers. So hopefully that'll be helpful. Okay, but anyway, we've got 35 minus x equals the product of 2 and the sum of a number and 7. So that's going to be 2 times parentheses the sum of a number and 7. Well, what does sum mean? What does sum mean? Well, sum actually means plus. Sum actually means plus. So we're going to be adding a number and 7. So a number is going to be x. So we're going to be doing x plus 7. Okay, so we have 2 times parentheses x plus 7. Okay, and I was using the rainbow marker there. That's why it looked so interesting, because I ran out of colors, so I switched to the rainbow marker. But anyway, this should be how you translate it. So you should have 35 minus x equals 2 times parentheses x plus 7. Okay, so that's a tough problem. There's really a lot to write out there. And we're not even done yet. We still have to actually solve it. So I'm going to go ahead and box this. But they wanted us to find the number. So in order to find the number, we're going to have to solve this equation. And remember, when you're solving an equation, the first thing you do is distribute, and then you combine like terms, and then you isolate the variable. So we're going to start by distributing here. Distributing the 2 on the right side. So we get 2 times x is 2x, and 2 times 7 is 14. So on the right side you should have 2x plus 14, and on the left side you should have 35 minus x. Okay, so 35 minus x equals 2x plus 14. Okay, and then next thing to do would be to combine like terms. However, there aren't any like terms on each side, so we're going to go ahead and go to the next step, which is to isolate the variable. Now to isolate the variable here, we notice that we have an x on both sides, and like I recommended, you should probably get rid of whichever x has a smaller coefficient. So here on the left side, this negative x actually means negative 1 times x, and since negative 1 is smaller than 2x, this is the one we want to get rid of. So how do you get rid of negative 1x? Well, what's the opposite of subtracting 1x? Adding 1x. So we're going to be adding x to both sides. Okay, and you don't have to write 1x, but I'll do it just this time, just for the sake of making it easy to understand. Okay, so we're going to add 1x to both sides, which is the same as adding x to both sides. On the left side, negative 1x plus 1x, those just cancel out and give you 0, so you have 35 left over on the left side. On the right side, 2 plus 1 is 3x. So we have 35 equals 3x plus 14. Okay, and now we've got all the x's on one side. So we have x on the right side, but we got rid of the one on the left side. So now our goal is to isolate x on the right side. So how are we going to do that? Well, you want to do your addition and subtraction before your multiplication and division when you're solving an equation. So first of all, we want to get rid of the positive 14. How do we do that? Well, the opposite of adding 14 is subtracting 14. So we minus 14 from both sides. Minus 14 from both sides. So on the left side, 35 minus 14 is actually going to give us 21. And then on the right side, the 14s cancel, so we just have 3x. Okay, so you should have 21 equals 3x. And then from here, to finish isolating x, we need to get rid of the 3. Well, that's the same as 3 times x, and what's the opposite of multiplying by 3? Dividing by 3. So we're going to divide both sides of the equation by 3. Okay, divide both sides by 3. Okay, so on the right side, the 3's just cancel out. And then on the left side, 21 divided by 3 is 7, because 7 times 3 is 21. So we get 7 equals x as our answer. Whew, that one was a lot of work. That took me a while too. But that's about as tough as your homework gets. So hopefully with this video you'll be prepared for your homework. But you can always come to office hours if you have more questions. Alright, thanks for watching.